What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York. And on the phone, we got a special guest. We got Chuck of Testament. Thank you for your time, man.
All right. Hey, Dan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I know it's been a hell of a crazy summer, right?
It's been a great summer for us.
Yeah.
Great, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we get into that, you know, asking, how the tour is going, you probably had to answer that 1,000 times over. But what I was really curious about with this Slayer farewell tour, with you guys, Anthrax and Slayer having, three old school thrash bands on there, but then having, bands like Lamb of God and Napalm Death and Behemoth on the tour, I'd imagine that you've seen a variety of different age groups on this tour, right?
Oh, totally, totally, and not just on this tour. I just see in general, especially for like the bands you had mentioned. Um, I think we're at a time where it's almost like a crossover because even at our headline shows, I see younger kids getting younger and younger, and I bet blame that especially for Sirius radio and online accessibility for bands. I think it's getting younger fans and younger generation are more computer oriented, and that they find their music and their info online these days. So we're seeing definitely a younger generation come into these shows, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool because I've seen you guys. The first time I actually ever saw you guys was at the Lamb of God, Kill Switch Engage, and Huntress tour back in
Right.
2013. But you've toured with bands like Kill Switch Engage, and then you just did a tour with Sepultura. I'd imagine the more you expand your audience to just of the different types of style of bands you play with, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've noticed like in the past, especially when metal kind of had its downtime and wasn't too popular. There's been a new generation of metal bands coming up, and I see a lot of those bands getting put with more classic bands and stuff. And sometimes it'll work, but sometimes it doesn't. And we've noticed over the years that when you match up bands that are from the same era, it seems to do better. Don't know why, but it just that's just the results.
Yeah.
So for a package like this, with a Lamb of God, they got a lot of history now. They're not a new band. Neither's Napalm. But with Behemoth, they were kind of a newer band coming up, making some names, and they did. This tour was great for them because they brought some of the new fans, and some of the old fans found them on this a tour like this. So
Absolutely. Now, now that the record cycle for Brotherhood of the Snake is now hitting the 2-year mark, do you have kind of like a conclusion on this whole record cycle, all in all?
this is it. This is the conclusion right now. This tour. After this tour, we're not booking any more tours. It's time to start writing the new record. And in a perfect world, we would hopefully get in the studio by December or January. I mean, that would be awesome. But, we don't know just because how long it took to get the last one written, it wasn't very easy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, this one, we'll see. I mean, I guess when you're writing, it all depends at what you got going on in your own personal life, So
Yeah,
hopefully when we to start working, we're all clear headed and ready to go.
definitely. Well, I'd imagine at this point in your career, because Testament's been around since the mid '80s. At this point in your career, when you're making new music, has the making of every record been a completely different experience, or do you kind
Yes.
of know what to expect going in the studio?
It's been a different experience every time. Especially from writing and then especially now in our later years because we don't all live near each other. We all live in different states, so it's a matter of working throughout the internet or getting together and just showing riffs here and there. So it's definitely a completely different way to write now than it was in the past when we all lived in California, lived in the same city where we can all go to the studio and rehearse. It's a little more challenging now, so we got to kind of prepare songs and riffs ahead of time and bring them and show them when we bring everybody to town. So it's definitely different now, and especially once we stepped into the studio, the last record especially, we've never went into the studio without having a demo or jam the songs as a band. But this last record, we didn't. We kind of just forced ourselves in the studio and forced ourselves to kind of get creative on the spot, and it worked. You know, I wasn't sure, and you're always trying to top your last record, and I thought the Formation of Damnation, no, the Dark Roots of Earth was actually going to be a tough record to top, and I was really nervous going into that because we didn't have all the songs completed. I didn't know what we had, but the end result for Brotherhood The State turned out awesome, and we couldn't be more proud of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a thrash favorite for 2016 for a lot of people. And but like what I was always curious about is, and I actually asked Eric this when we interviewed him last week, but at this does Testament at this point like have like a formula that they tend to stick with making new music, or does Testament ever like to experiment and maybe go outside the box a little bit?
We don't like to go outside the box too much. I would say, I mean, we wouldn't try to follow the trend or what's hip. If anything, we would just first and foremost when we write, we said, "Is it thrashing? You know, it's got to be thrash." Okay, we're writing a thrash song. You know, and so that's what always kind of that that's how far out of the box we get. Because I don't know. I mean, we've built this reputation. We've stayed true to what we've done for so many years. I think our true fans, if we did something too drastically different from the norm, I think it might go over their head, or they might just say, "What are you doing?" You know. And at this point, we're really writing for ourselves. I mean, we really like to play thrash music, so I think if you really believe in that, that's what you need to do. And there's not you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
So all you can do is your best.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we actually at NAM earlier this year we interviewed the film director Bob Nalbandian who wrote the Rise of LA thrash music, and you guys pretty much cut your teeth in that scene, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'd imagine with Metallica and Slayer and Megadeth and Exodus and Armored Saint and all these bands that come out of there, was it kind of easy to cut your teeth as a thrash band in that scene rather than do it anywhere else?
Well, it was so new. I mean, there wasn't a thrash scene at that time. Our scene in the Bay Area in the early '80s, it was punk rock and hair metal, like glam metal. That's what was happening in the early '80s. Once Metallica arrived in the Bay Area and Exodus finished their first demo and record, this whole new scene just generated quick, and a whole new sound hit the Bay Area. And there was so many places to play in the Bay Area at that time too, that all those thrash bands, and then all of a sudden, bam, all these bands started. Death Angels, Testament, Violence, Forbidden. They're just all these thrash bands kind of just came out of nowhere so fast. All the glam bands left the Bay Area and went to LA. So we almost had our own little scene there in the Bay Area of thrash. It was very cool. And again, we had all these cool places to play too. So it was definitely something. I mean, definitely didn't realize what was happening and how special it was because we didn't think about it. We were just living it. But if you look back on it now, it's like, man, we were so lucky and so right there on that pulse when that scene started.
Yeah, it's almost like you're not really aware of a scene till you look back like a couple decades ago and then
Totally.
you realize it. It's like, is it fair to say that maybe like at the time people just take it for granted when it's actually happening, and then they look back and realize how strong it was?
I don't know if it was taken for granted, but I think it was something that grew so fast, and I think the Bay Area friends were so tight because all the shows, there was always an after party at somebody's either Exodus rehearsal or somebody's house. There was always a party, and it was always the same people that were at the shows. So it was like an extension of the shows where I had all these parties. So it was very close, and everybody supported everybody, and everybody had a feeling of friendly competition. Everybody wanted their band to do the best, but they still yet supported each other, especially Bay Area bands, because then all of a sudden it started the East Coast, West Coast, thrash, which is better. So but yeah, looking back on it, you're like, man, we were right in it.
Yeah, which is really cool to see on how like that area now has like the legacy. It almost seems like there's a location for every genre of music, like Tampa, Florida being the
Yeah,
capital of death metal, or New York City, where we're from, being the hardcore capital.
right,
Like maybe it's something in the air, something in the water.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you get onto something like that, people grab onto it and things grow, especially when it's something new that you're not used to or don't recognize, and and it's great. That's the beauty of music. There's always going to be somebody coming in creating something different and special or new and unique, and that's the beauty of music.
Yeah. Now, as a vocalist, do you need to like hear music in order to come up with like a lyrical concept,
Yeah,
or just oh, so
yeah,
it's not like you came
yeah,
up with a personal meaning. Like I know that Return to Serenity, everybody could come to a conclusion on that, and maybe like you came up with that, and you
yeah,
know, but
yeah. I mean, I usually vibe off the music. What the music tells me how to sing it, either to be a death voice or more of a melodic voice. I kind of just feed off the energy of the riff first, and then I take it from there.
okay. Now, now, one other question I'd like to have you before we move on to your new vape line, because that's kind of like the main source of this interview. But one question I'd like to ask is, with a lot of new school thrash bands coming out there, whether it will be Havoc or Power Trip or Warbringer, like a lot of these bands would say that they took inspiration from you guys or Anthrax or Slayer. Do do these newer school bands ever like inspire you in a way, whether it's in your music or
Totally.
just
No, they do inspire because it's almost like it takes full circle. And you see what's coming around in the style they're playing. Um, they influence me because you get it because I like thrash metal. So when it's done right and it's good, yeah, it definitely influences me. You know,
you know, what makes like a thrash record good?
the guitar tone. It's got to have that really thick, crunchy tone that just grabs you.
Yeah. It almost seems like, like I could definitely tell what song is a Testament song or a Megadeth song or a Metallica song, but I guess the guitar tones are what kind of make it stand out a little bit at the same time, right?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Yep. So let's move on to the vape line, which is called the Chief, right?
Yeah, I got actually three products.
Oh wow. Um,
Yeah, I did. 2015, 14 or 15, I was approached by Lord Vapor to put out the first Chief Vaporizer, and I did, and that did well for a few years. But Lord Vapor kind of, were kind of fizzling out, and the company was sold, and the new owner bought it last year, and he approached me about doing a new line of vaporizers, the Chief Vaporizer. So I said, sure. But he wanted to take it a step further and do an oil cartridge and also like a pipe as well. So we came up with three products. We did the new improved Chief, which is called the War Drum, which burns weed and wax. It's a
wow.
vaporizer. And, vaporizers have came a long way since 2015. The battery life and the first generation of them weren't very good. Well, they didn't last very long, or they died and they just were useless. Where the new one I have now, it has an interchangeable battery, so the battery life lasts longer. Or you can buy spare batteries, charge them, and keep them with you. If you're out camping or something, you don't have access to power. You at least you'll have. It's not going to die on you. So
Which is
that's
awesome.
the number one thing, and we improved the way it looks, the shape of it. It's more inconspicuous. The mouthpiece, which the first generation we were having problems breaking them just the way you took them off. So we improved it with a new glass mouthpiece that has a magnetic top that just sticks to the top by a magnet, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's got some really cool graphics, just like the first generation Chief, same graphics.
Yeah.
That one's called the War Drum. So the second one we have is an oil cartridge that's called the Dreamcatcher, and it looks like a Zippo lighter. And you can use anything from a quarter gram to a full gram cartridge in them, and you can vape THC oils or CBD oils, either one. But it's a very cool. And this one is actually the one I've been using mostly on the road here because the convenience and just having it in my pocket protected with the Zippo top lid is pretty cool. It's pretty handy. So
Yeah.
that's the one I've been using. But the battery life on that, I charged it on July 26th, the first day, and I still haven't ran out of the battery yet.
Oh
So
my
I'm probably
God.
so the battery's been kicking ass every day. I've went through so many cartridges over the 10-day period. So
If only phones were like
it's
that.
like, man, it's kicking ass, man. The battery on this one.
Yeah.
And then the third product is called the Tomahawk, which is basically a cone-shaped pipe. Usually in your normal pipe, you got to have two hands, one hand to hold the pipe and one to light the lighter. This has a built-in lighter built into the end of the cone. So it comes with these like 5 little cartridges that you preload with weed. And you just take a cartridge at a time, pop it in there, and push the button, and it lights it. So it's very inconspicuous. And the other night we were actually backstage. I was showing some people after the show, and it was windy that day, and they were trying to light their pipe, and I pulled my Tomahawk out and said, "Try this. Let's see how this works in the wind." And we had no problem. And so we're like, that works great in the wind.
You should have had somebody film that, and that could have been the commercial for it.
It could have been. It totally could have been. It was a perfect setup for it.
And I like the reference to Mike Patton there too.
Yeah.
But one like question I was curious because like especially I've noticed in the thrash scene, you have Megadeth putting out their own beer, Dave Ellefson putting out his own coffee, so many different bands putting out their own sort of brand. How did you get into the vaping business?
Well, I've always burned, and I had a good friend that actually owned Lord Vapor, the first owner of it. He was a metalhead from the Bay Area and a Testament fan, and he's the first one who approached me. So, at the time it was kind of a new thing, which actually turned into a really cool thing because it exposed it to people that, used it for medicinal uses. I have my sister-in-law. She passed away from cancer last year, and she was older than me, and she was kind of the person who didn't believe in marijuana or was kind of, never smoked weed in her life. But her doctor had mentioned, because she didn't have an appetite. And so they told her, maybe you should try, marijuana. And she didn't know the first thing about it. So my brother called me and asked me, can you bring the vaporizer, one of the vaporizers, and some weed? And I did. I took it over to her, and she used it, showed her how to use it, and it helped her. She got an appetite and used it until she passed. So for me personally, that was something that was like, God, that felt great. that it was how close it was to me and my family, that there's got to be other people out there that are going through the same thing that I just experienced, that has a family member that's going through an ailment that necessarily doesn't believe in smoking weed, but is willing to give it a shot. Yeah. And the beauty about the vaporizer is that, someone who's never smoked weed, who's fired up their first joint, is probably going to comp their brains out and,
I can attest to that.
And probably not go, man, this isn't fun.
Yeah.
But when you're vaping, it's so smooth and you don't blow smoke, but you're actually getting more of the THC than you are by burning a joint.
Yeah.
So it was actually more beneficial and easier on somebody that was beginning to use weed. So I thought that was pretty cool too.
And I've noticed the smell in it is not so much stronger. I'm not a big fan of the smell of weed when somebody's smoking a joint, so I think the vape really kind of works the best there.
Yeah, it is. And, and like for myself, I still like smoking a joint, but I use the vaporizers for, like, I go to a Raider game or an A's game or a Warrior game, or I go to the movies or, 10, 12-hour plane flight. Those, when my vaporizers come in, very handy.
Yeah. Not to mention
they don't smell. You go down the bathroom on the plane and it just doesn't smell.
Oh my God! But I could imagine getting caught on a plane with one of those might not be the best idea, right?
It might not be, but it's so new, and when they see it through, security, they're probably not really sure what it is.
Okay. I don't know. I was worried that you get caught smoking that on the plane, you might end up in Guantanamo Bay. But
yeah, I might. But again, there was the old days where we would take one hit off a joint and blow it out in to ease our, flush the toilet and blow it down the toilet. That was the old way you used to do it.
Yeah.
But this way now, you don't even have to worry about it. It's just you can't even smell it.
Yeah. I've always said that vapes are also good, especially if you're in a band, because it saves you a fortune on production for stage. Because now you could just become the fog machine, right? That's what I've
No
always.
shit.
That's a good way to
That's
market
right.
it. Just hide underneath Gene's drum set and just blow the vape the whole time and have him do a solo. And
There you go.
that's
For
great.
sure.
But Chuck, I want to thank you so much for your time. Is there just anything you want to promote quickly? I know that we're
Well,
expecting
just
some.
that you can definitely find all the product will be in hopefully some local smoke shops over time. But right now, you can find it at lordvaporusa.com.
Awesome.
You can find that, and also you can find there. I have the Chief of Thrash merchandise products. I have T-shirts, phone covers, all kinds of cool products with the Chief imagery on it.
Awesome. So that's great. And we could be expecting some New Testament for 2019 as well?
You sure can.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Chuck, so much. I'd imagine you have to hit the stage at the Darien Lake show in probably what, a half hour, something like that?
Hour and a half.
Oh my God. Well, have a great show tonight, man. Have a safe rest of the tour. Thank you so much for your time.
Cool, man. Good talking to you.
Yeah. Chuck Billy of Testament, everybody.
All right. See ya.
Take it easy.